Welcome to a special offering by Conversations with a Wounded Healer, the Burnt Out Practice Owner. This series will discuss the current state of group practice ownership, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll hear current and former practice owners' tales of glory and woe as we attempt to answer the ultimate question, why do we do this to ourselves? And we want to hear from you too. What have been your biggest moments of struggle or triumph? What are questions you want us to explore? I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. I owned and operated my practice, Head Heart Therapy, for 10 years before selling in 2023. Ownership was an equally grueling and rewarding experience for me, and I now spend my time helping current practice owners find balance for themselves. Join us between releases of Conversations with a Wounded Healer for this special series. Oh, hi. Welcome to the Burnt Out Practice Owner Podcast. So excited you're here. Hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are in this world. I'm happy that you're here. If you like the podcast, and I sure hope you do, I hope you're not hate listening. That would be super weird. So I'm just going to assume that you like the podcast. And if you want to share, that would be amazing. You can share with your friends or rate and review on Apple Podcast by going to ratethispodcast.com/woundedhealer. So this is embedded in my Conversations with a Wounded Healer podcast, which is why it's Wounded Healer. And you can hire me if you're a group practice owner. I am doing consulting with folks around all the things people-wise. So my guest today is a lot of financial things and other things. I'm the people things. So if you've got people problems or you problems as a practice owner, I'm your gal. And I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you like. I want to hear what you want to learn about. And I mean, if you want to tell me what you don't like, I will take constructive criticism as well. So you can reach out to me on Instagram at headheartbiztherapy or by email at sarah@headheartbiztherapy.com. So today's guest, Casey Gromer, I'm really excited for you to hear her episode. So one of the things that has been driving me bazonkers, and yes, bazonkers is a word now, it's a cross between bizarre and bonkers, so bazonkers. What's driving me bazonkers is this rift that we have between practice owners and employees right now, and how people don't always understand how the money stuff works. And I get it. I also don't understand how the money stuff works. So I hire people to tell me how the money stuff works because it's not my strong suit. And I think for many of us, it's not our strong suits. And so I got in contact with Casey because she and I were both in Maureen Werbach's The Visionary magazine for group practice owners. So if you're a group practice owner and you're not already subscribed to The Visionary, go check that out. And Casey has worked with Maureen and helped Maureen really build up her practice. And so I wanted to talk to her too because she knows the financial things. She's really trying to help practice owners feel empowered in what they're doing, also help employees feel like they are getting what they need in practices. And it's a real challenge to try to balance all of that and make that happen. And Casey, I just really liked Casey. Never met her before, but instantly felt a kinship and felt that we were on the same page in terms of the heart that we want to bring into the work that we do. And so I hope that you like Casey as well. So let me tell you about her. Casey Gromer is the founder of C-Suite Boutique and the host of Female Founders Breaking Boundaries podcast. She specializes in helping visionary practice owners create profit by implementing leadership and accountability systems. She offers valuable insights on topics like effective delegation of ownership, performance accountability, and creating leadership structure. Oh, and I also wanted to mention while we were here, another plug for Maureen. I think that Maureen was probably inspired by the work that she and Casey did together, and she recently released a book called The Accountability Equation. So practice owners should absolutely go check that out because it's got a lot of valuable information in it. So I hope you enjoy this amazing conversation with Casey Gromer. Are you a therapist stepping into a leadership role for the first time? Or maybe you've been in a leadership position for a while, but you're bumping up against new struggles. It's a transformative journey and one that can be deeply rewarding, but also filled with unique challenges. Many therapists find themselves in leadership positions because of their exceptional therapeutic skills. Yet leading, supervising, or managing others requires a whole new set of competencies not typically covered in graduate school. Our Authentic Leaders group is here to help you become the authentic and wholehearted leader you aspire to be. And we believe that the journey is best undertaken with the guidance of experienced mentors alongside fellow learners. The next cohort of Authentic Leaders will run November 2024 through June 2025, meeting once monthly on Fridays for 90 minutes. We'll also have some additional opportunities for connection and support along the way. Join me in this journey of self-discovery and leadership mastery, where you'll enhance your leadership skills and forge meaningful connections with fellow therapists committed to their own growth and the betterment of the therapy field. www.headheartbiztherapy.com/authentic-leaders-group. Hello, Casey. Welcome to the Burnt Out Practice Owner.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good today. I started taking this class, and it's way too much to get into, but I think it's going to be revolutionary both for me and for my consulting clients, and I am freaking out about it. So I'm so excited today.
Well, I'm good. I'm glad I caught you in that frame of mind then.
I know. That's not always where I am every day. How about you?
I'm doing well. I've got a lot on my plate, but I'm excited now. You just kind of inspired me because I have been thinking about, finding the joy in what we do. And sometimes we just get so into we've got to get this done. We've got to get this done. We got to get this done. And you forget what was it that made me do this to begin with? And so I love that you're taking this class and it's making me think what do I need to do to make sure that I get some enjoyment out of this again and not forget about it?
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I want to dig into that a little bit specifically around being a therapist in private practice, but introduce yourself first. Tell people what it is that you're really doing in the world.
Awesome. Well, I'm Casey Gromer, and my business is C-Suite Boutique, and I'm a fractional integrator. And for any of you who think that term is a foreign language, what that means is I work with group practices, and my role is to kind of bridge the gap between the practice owner and the business, aka the employees. And I bring all of the functions of the business together, the finance, the marketing, the operations, and I make sure everything's working the way it should be so that the practice is healthy and that the clients are getting what they need when they come to visit you.
That's a beautiful elevator speech. Well done. I know exactly what you do.
Did you record that? Because I might need to use that again.
Recorded. We'll give you the transcript. You got it all. That was brilliant. That makes a lot of sense. So kind of back to this idea that you just brought up of finding the joy in what you do. I guess, what are you seeing lately where you feel like you've been disconnected from that? Is it worse lately than it has been since you started this work?
I think so. And I'm seeing it too in the clients that I work with. And I mean, I'm not like an economist and I'm not an expert at this, but it just feels like there's more going on in the world. There's more ways that we're connecting. There's more ways we're communicating. There's more ways that we can ask people for things. And I'm a people pleaser. So I find that I'm doing all of these things because I want others to be successful. I want to lift them up. I want them to be happy. And I forget to think about myself. And the next thing I know, I'm working. I've got 3 kids at home and I haven't taken any time to think about what is it I like to do? Or what is it that replenishes my bucket? And so I think that's where it is, where it's the email, the text, the Slacks, the Facebooks, everything coming at us at all times adds to our mental load. And we don't have capacity anymore for anything else.
I think you're right. Because I always used to want to be able to have an away message on my texts or my Facebook, right? All these other places, because there's this expectation of being available all the time. And I mean, talk about wanting things to work well in a private practice, group practice setting. If you're expected to be available all the time, that's going to be very anxiety provoking for a lot of people. So I'm sure you're coaching people around that all the time in terms of their workspaces, right?
So it's one of the first things, in fact, it's in my welcome packet that we ask our practice owners to take clarity days.
Mm,
And it's interesting because a lot of us view taking this time away as selfish or
unproductive.
we guilt ourselves. But as someone who works with business owners, I can tell you without a doubt that when the owners, the practice owners, my clients are taking those clarity days, they are coming back. They're much easier to work with. Their brains are functioning at a higher level. They're making better decisions. And it's like, yeah, we have to do this, people.
Yeah, absolutely. And the employees have to do that too from clients,
Yes.
right? And I
Yes.
brought you here specifically to talk about numbers. And this is a big place of contention in, at least in Chicago. I don't know what's happened in the rest of the world because I'm on the Chicago Facebook groups mostly, but I'm guessing that this is everywhere. And two things that come up with numbers all the time. One, therapists feel like they're not getting paid enough. And number two, they feel like they're being asked to see too many clients. So I wanted to see what we can unpack around that, like what you're seeing, trends, maybe case example. I don't even know. Who knows what you're going to bring, but your expertise.
I will do that. And by the way, none of us are getting paid enough. Like, let's just acknowledge
Yeah.
that. Like, we're, we all deserve a lot more money than we're getting. So I can see it from both sides
Right.
for sure.
Well, I guess this is the other thing that I frame this question with is what's happening in the larger world right now. I know we're not in a recession, but a lot of people feel like we are. And I mean, I went to Walgreens yesterday. My husband is like, why is the credit card bill so high? And I went to Walgreens yesterday. I didn't buy anything that spectacular and it was $175. Mostly it was like toothpaste and like I have these fucking eye wipes I have to use for my dry eye, all kinds of stupid shit like that. And I was like, bro, this is $175. Like this used to be $50, you know? And so
Yes.
what's going on in the larger world? Small business owners are being asked to make the gap between what's happening in the outside world and what is capable within the small business. So that's another kind of like frame we can hold around this. But what do you got?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many factors at play here because like you said, if you're thinking in terms of small business owners, you've got the larger businesses who have the advantage of scale,
Right.
right? So they've built a machine that works really well so they can scale, scale, scale. And that means their overhead costs, their margins go up, their overhead costs go down.
And explain what a margin is to folks who might not
A
know.
margin. A margin is the difference between the money that comes in and the money that goes out. So if you think of it in a group practice perspective, there's two margins. There's what we call the gross margin, which is the client pays their bill and then the therapist makes their wage from that session. So that's gross margin. And if you're running a business, there's a lot of other expenses that go into running a business besides just paying the clinician. And so the business has to make enough money after the therapist gets paid to pay the insurance and the taxes and the rent and the electricity and all of the other things, the furniture that people sit on so they can get comfortable and share their feelings. So the second margin is the net margin, and that's considered profit. So after all the bills have been paid, we've paid our clinicians, we've paid the rent, and there has to be a little bit of money left over at the end because that's got to be able to carry over to future months. So if you think of your bank account, you never run your bank account down to zero, right? Because you have to have a little cushion there to carry you from month to month. And that's the major reason a practice has to make a profit is because there's going to be fluctuations month to month. And we want to make sure there's money in there. And profit is also a great resource to use to reinvest back into the practice. So this would be things like benefits for the employees, like maybe expanding locations or maybe buying equipment or things that are going to improve the client experience and the employee experience.
And I'd love to linger with this for a second because this is something that I don't think has really like sunk in with employees when it comes to this concern, right? I just did a survey and got 56 responses from group practice employees in Chicago. And I'm gonna do a whole thing and like show all of the data. But what was really interesting to me is I asked, what do you think feels fair in terms of how much you should be paid? And by and large, most people said they believed that 70% or more felt fair. Right. You're shaking your head no. And you're shaking your head no because it's where the employee is coming from is like, I need more money to pay my bills. And where the employer is coming from is, I need the money to pay my bills. Like, it's all like everybody wants the same thing, but the resources right now feel more scarce than they felt before.
I think it's important. A term you used is what's fair, because let's be clear. The clinicians who are saying 70% is fair, absolutely. You're working hard. You paid a lot of money for your education. You're very good at what you do. So what's fair? Absolutely.
Yeah.
What is reasonable is a different thing, because I can tell you for a fact that a group practice, and I've seen I've seen the finances of a bunch of group practices, and they have to stay right around 50% overall,
Right.
because the rest of that 50% is going to pay the bills. And I also want to make a point here, since I've seen the finances of a lot of group practice owners. I will tell you that all of those group practice owners care so much about their clinicians. Some of them don't even take a paycheck.
Right. Right.
You know, so in some cases, I've seen some employees, saying 70% is fair, and they don't understand where the rest of that money goes, and they think it's going into the pocket of the practice owner, and
Right.
it's actually really not.
Right, right. I mean, just for an example, the way that I paid myself when I was an employer, I took home about $50,000 a year, which is not a lot at all. And it was like my accountant sort of helped us figure out like what was best, because she also does like our family accounting and my husband's mother's, like, so she has the big picture and knew that my take home being small actually was better for taxes and blah, blah, all the things. And so all of the money, all of the profit stayed in the business. Like when I was leaving, I don't want to tell Rael's business, but at one point in time before I left, there was $200,000 in the account just sitting there. Like that wasn't money that went to go buy my house, right? That wasn't money that was like, doing all of these extravagant things. And yet I think that's the assumption that a lot of employees have. And I've been trying to talk about the difference between like the amount of unpaid labor of a practice owner kind of feels like a mother. And I've made this comparison. I know it probably feels very patronizing to some employees, but I think it's very similar because as a practice owner, I was going to networking events all the time. I'm not drawing in money directly from that, right? Like I was podcasting, which I know like gave us some thought leadership and made us more popular. I pay almost $1,000 a month to have a really beautiful sounding podcast, right? Like all of these things that are the unpaid labor, that's what the business is paying me for, not for just sitting around, on my throne with my wand, eating bonbons, like ordering my subjects around.
Well, if you're like most group practice owners, you're looking at the finances, like your hands are in understanding, where's the money going? Can we afford to do this?
Mm-hmm.
I have to pay the taxes. Is the bookkeeping done right? And then you're getting all kinds of questions and operations. Is it time to hire? Who do we
Right.
need to hire next? I'm interviewing, I'm recruiting. And then you're also in the marketing, where most group practices aren't paying somebody to be dedicated to marketing.
Right.
And so you're out hitting the streets and you're networking and you're making visits and giving presentations. And yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into being in that role.
Yeah. And I don't want this to sound all like boo-hoo, practice owners have it so hard. How can we help empower employees to feel better about their role in the group practice? You just got so excited. Your face just lit up so brightly. I love it.
Because this is exciting. I have had some success doing this.
Amazing.
And just seeing the transformation is okay. So maybe this is the joy I get out of what I do. So here's what we do is the first thing is, as a practice owner is growing the practice, it starts out as you, right? And then it grows and it grows. And at some point, it stops being you, but it doesn't.
Right.
So the clinicians are looking at you as like, this is your business. So the first thing we do is we reframe that. This is not Sarah's business. This is our business. It's the business. It's the business that serves clients, and our goal is to help them and improve their lives. And so we get the employees to look at it as a business, and we're making decisions for the best of the business and not for the best of Sarah's paycheck
Right.
or, Sarah's taxes or whatever. So that is really helpful, because if you look at it as a separate entity, you're thinking differently.
Yeah.
And then the next thing we do is we don't get into a ton of details, because not everybody needs to know the nitty-gritty of finances and not everybody wants to, but we do some explanations of, here's why we're making decisions we're making. Here's financially where the practice is at. Here's financially where we need to be. And especially when you get to clinicians who are playing dual roles, like I'm a clinician, but I'm also helping in some administrative way, and they see that, it becomes much more clear to them. Oh, we don't call it cash flow, but they start to understand, here's the bank account, here's the bills. The decisions we make have to make those things line up. Otherwise, the doors don't stay open. And then I don't have a job as a clinician.
Right.
My clients are left on the street.
Right.
And yeah. So the thought process changes a lot just by thinking of it as an entity rather than Sarah's business.
Yeah.
And when we think of it in terms of the decisions I make are going to affect whether I continue to have a job here and whether my clients continue to get supported, that also helps change the way we look at making decisions.
Well, and I also do hear this as empowering the employee with knowledge, right? And a little bit of business acumen. Like, what are you saying? What are the magic words? Because I feel like that's what some business owners I see try to do, and it's not landing. What is the secret sauce?
Well, it might be different for everyone. In the cases that I've participated in where it's worked really well is when employees are brought into the bigger picture. The first thing that happens is they feel valued and appreciated, right? And they feel like they're a part of something bigger. So they're not just showing up and collecting a paycheck. They're like, oh, this is my practice. I'm a part of this. This is a part of my community. So they have a different sense of loyalty in that situation. So when we start talking about the practice in terms of the business and keeping the doors open and stuff, a lot of the clinicians recognize, like, we're all in the same boat here. It's not about me lining somebody else's pockets. Right. We do care about our clients, and practice owners do really care about their employees, like a lot, to the point that they're foregoing paychecks to make sure that the employees are taken care of. So when the employees see that, hey, we're doing this because we love people and we want to help them, that also helps a little bit to kind of get everybody on the same page in terms of how decisions are being made and what's feasible for the practice.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up, because I've had some people on here that were employees, and the theme that keeps coming up is transparency. And what I have found in my position as a leader is that there are certain personality types that want certain transparency, and there are certain personality types that, even though they say they might want it, they can't handle it. So like you said, not everybody wants the full big picture. Some people get overwhelmed. I definitely know some employees who would feel scared, right? If they were like, wait, that's all that's in the business account? Like, how do you expect to keep paying me and this and that, right? So I wonder if we can define, I don't know if it's defined, but sort of talk about transparency before being transparent to help people understand what the business owner is holding for you, that is part of why they get paid to do what they do, is hold some of these things that you don't want to have to worry about.
That's absolutely true. And it's a lot to shoulder to really look at the bottom line of a business. So one of the things that I've had success with is explaining it in a way of, we work backwards, right? So we explain about, here's how finances work. Revenue minus expenses equals profit. I mean, a little bit more detail than that, but we do the basic explanation. And then We kind of frame it as in terms of the decisions we make affect the sustainability of the practice.
Yep.
So if the profit goes negative, this is what happens. And this is what happens when we are profitable. Here's where the profits are going.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about how they benefit the employees, the practice, all of that. And then we say, in order for this practice to remain, to sustain business, this is the level we need to be at. And so we translate that in terms of minimum number of sessions to make enough revenue to cover the bills. And so that's where the numbers come in, is we're doing the analysis to say, these are the targets that are going to make sure that the bank account is happy and the bill collectors are happy and our therapists are getting paid and our clients are continuing to have sessions.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to the objectives, right, the goal for how many sessions, therapists should perform, I think this is the other piece where what's happening in society is being expected to be like made up in the workplace. And I mean, one of the truisms that's coming more to light right now is the ableism in America, period, and in all fields, every single field, right? And I guess, because I had a teacher that I was learning with about anti-racism, and we were talking about this conundrum of being a practice owner, knowing what you need to do to keep your business running, and also knowing that sometimes people need a break, or you have a mental illness and you have to go to treatment, or there's all sorts of reasons why people can't meet their, let's say, 20 client minimum a week. But I don't know the answer to that right now, because we don't have a system in this country that is going to catch those folks who aren't able to meet those ableist productivity measures.
That is a tough one, because I see that happen in every client I've ever been to. There's some, like, a family health emergency,
right,
or some, maternity leave or burnout, or, something. So it does happen. So in terms of numbers, the practice owners who are predicting this is going to happen are more ready for this, because they've recognized that 52 weeks out of the year is not doable for a person. So we're going to back that off to 48 weeks or whatever. And then we're going to calculate sessions. And so being more realistic about what we can accomplish helps them prepare to fill those gaps. So that's one thing. The other thing I've seen is the unfortunate thing is, like you said, not every state has things available, but there are programs in some states that are available to help cover time off for people, like the family medical leave and things like that. So whenever you can find a resource like that, that's super helpful as well. And especially if the employee and the practice owner can work together on that and make it in the best interest of both the employee and the practice.
Right. Yeah. I'm just thinking about, because the other word that keeps coming up is exploitation. And I guess, having been a practice owner and I've never been an employee of a group practice, but just being an employee anywhere, I mean, maybe it feels like exploitation if I think that somebody is profiting off of my work and not doing anything. But I guess I'm just trying to reconcile that word within myself. And I was listening to Pod Save America this morning, and they were talking about how people are viewing Joe Biden right now based on what they're feeling because of their grocery bills. And they were saying that even though the economy is better under Joe Biden than it was under Trump, you can't tell people to feel differently. And so I think that's the piece with group practice owners to employees too, is that if employees are feeling exploited, then we've got to do something to meet that feeling, even if we can't make the numbers different.
I feel like so this is my own personal observation, that I'm seeing a couple things happening in terms of employees and that those feelings that they're having. The first one is, I think that there's a gap in, we leave school, right? And there's a gap in expectations of, what does it mean to be a clinician? What does that look like? What is expected of me? is probably not being explained very well.
Right.
And so people are hearing from awesome podcasts and like really successful people like, hey, I make so much money
Yeah.
and I only work 5 hours a week. And so there's this expectation that this is like a widespread
Yeah.
thing, when in reality, it doesn't always work that way. But on the other hand, I'm also seeing that what work looked like 10, 20 years ago looks different
Yeah.
today because, like I said, the mental load, it is a lot harder
Yeah.
to do the same amount of work today than it used to be. And people
Yeah.
are not able to take on as much anymore. And so what they're feeling, maybe they're feeling exploited, but what's actually happening is just a capacity issue, to be honest.
And that word capacity keeps coming up over and over and over again. My hope in working with employees is to be able to widen their capacity to tolerate what's happening in the world and to also be able to understand the context in which they're working and help maybe, because I imagine that those of us who go into entrepreneurship have probably an expanded level of capacity than somebody who wouldn't do that. Right. And so I think, because actually I had this conversation on the podcast yesterday with the woman, Rael, who bought my practice. And when she was a manager before she got to my practice, she said, well, if I can do it, you can do it. And she had that mindset. And as I sort of coached her on managing people, she was finally able to recognize like, oh, my capacity is different. And I can do 5 things, in an hour where somebody else may only be able to do 2 or 3. And it's not that I am better. It's just that my capacity is different. And I love this frame because it feels so much less pathologizing than like, you can't meet your numbers or, some sort of like, blame game.
And you also mentioned the ableism term, and that's what came to my mind first, is because everybody's lives look different.
Right.
And if you look at people who are parents or caring for
Right.
family members or who are involved in other philanthropy efforts or have other things going on, their capacity is diminished because they're offering value to the world in other ways as well, versus someone like an entrepreneur who may just have boundless energy or maybe has a different home life where they have a lot more time or energy to devote to it. So there's that too. And the thing is we don't want to punish the people who are parents and who are caring because, they're bringing value to the universe in that way as well. So I haven't figured out the formula yet for figuring out how to bridge the gap between those who have the capacity and those who don't.
Well, and I think there's something to be said for making, and I realize this is going to probably sound ableist, so let me unpack it. But I think this is where to bridge the gap between the expectation and reality of what happens when you graduate, right? A lot of times I'm hearing people now who are going straight from grad school into group practice who did not realize how long it was going to take to fill their caseload. And there's a whole lot of reasons why, a whole lot of things that need to happen before a therapist like kind of gets the confidence really to be able to like build and maintain a caseload. And so I think that if we can provide more education, more support, more understanding of what it is that you actually need, then you're going to make different choices about where you work. And I say this, and I know that that sounds ableist, but everybody in our field has a master's degree. So we do have privilege. If you are a therapist, you have privilege. You might not have the exact same privileges as everybody else, but if you've accessed a master's degree, we've got a little bit of privilege to make some of these choices, right? Sometimes our choices are more limited depending on like, I know therapists in rural areas don't have the same amount of choices as those of us in cities. So of course, there are always exceptions, but so this isn't about blaming the individual, but I think if we're taking a more honest assessment of what is needed, sometimes we have to grieve that we don't get to make the choices we would want to make because we need to feed our kids or we need to XYZ, right? We may need to make choices to get a salary job that has a, stable income, that has better health insurance that's covered by the employer, right? All of these other things that a small business environment can't necessarily provide. And there's grief there or there's anger, right? And that's not because practice owners are terrible and don't want to offer it. this is just the limitation of small business.
Yeah, totally. I totally get that. And I'm still processing what you just said because it was beautiful. I'm like, absolutely. I've worked with a few practices whose their values, what they were wanting to deliver was even less about the client and more about the clinician, where, we want to be the place who is going to nurture and turn out great clinicians. And then, by the nature of that, we're going to attract great clients too.
Right.
I think it's really hard, especially as a small business owner, it's really hard to do that because training and educating and hand-holding is a lot of overhead.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, like, how else do you do it? Because you're right. Filling caseloads does not come naturally. And the practices who are able to fill caseloads quickly are investing in coaching their clinicians.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I could talk to you forever. So we're going to have another conversation, I think.
I would be open to that.
Yeah. Lovely. Yeah. But for today, any final words based on what we're sharing with folks that you want either employees or employers to hear?
Well, for employees, I just want you to know that your business, your practice owner, wherever you're working, they seriously would forego their paycheck for you. They love you. They appreciate you. They want you to stay. And for group practice owners, there's just finding that happy medium between, of course, 30 sessions a week would be great for my bottom line, but there's very few clinicians out there who have the capacity to do that these days.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you, Casey. It's so lovely to meet you.
It was lovely to meet you too. And thank you for inviting me to have this conversation.
Of course. Oh, and where can people find you? Let's tell them that.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Well, first of all, I have my own podcast.
Oh!
It's called Female Founders Breaking Boundaries. I might be going through a rebrand in the near future because I'm finding that some of the issues I talk about aren't necessarily limited to gender. So we're thinking about that. But on the podcast, you will find a lot more of what we just talked about. So come on over and join me there. And if you're interested in understanding a little bit more about what fractional integrator work looks like, you can visit my website at c-suiteboutique.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you again.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks for listening to the special Burnt Out Practice Owner series. If you want more information about today's guest, go to our website at www.headheartbiztherapy.com/podcast. Thanks to the Creative Imposter Studios for editing, and I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. Until next time, bye-bye.